Hello, everybody.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Sorry for the mishap there.
Happy to be here.
All right, I think we're ready to go, Kate.
Fantastic. I would now like to call the April 20th, 2022 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with a roll call?
Sure, Kate Collardson,
Present.
Mary Lynn,
Present.
Adam Reed,
Here.
Charles Musgrave is not here yet. Kay Volmeyer,
Here.
Robert Davidson,
Here.
and Jim Metcalf is unable to join us today. For staff members, we have Lisa Knobloch. Here. Francie Jaffe. Here. Chuck Finleyan,
Here.
Wes Lowry,
Here.
Heather McIntyre, and Charles Caminiti.
Present.
And Councilmember Martin will be joining us shortly. So Chair,
And
you have a
Heather is
quorum.
also here, Annie Noble.
Oh yeah, Annie Noble and Hannah Mulroy are also here.
And Aaron Fosdick will be joining us later ahead of the sugar factory item.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks.
Great, thank you. So we acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the first peoples have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. So, moving on to approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Anybody have any things they'd like to see amended or a motion to approve?
I have no changes to recommend. I'm reluctant to move to approve it since I had to abandon the meeting a few minutes early.
That's fair.
I was not here last time, so I cannot make any motions.
Same here. So
Oh my
I
God.
cannot make any motion. Quite a rare event indeed, I
Yeah, no
suppose.
kidding. Mary, you were here, right?
I was here, but I must admit that I just barely scanned the minutes, so I'm not really the person who should be motioning to approve them.
Well, I
was looking at other things in the packet, and I
That's fair.
got to come back to that.
I did review them, and I'm happy to make the motion, but I'm wondering if we'll be able to get a second. And
I'll second it and vote in favor. I just
okay.
And just so you know, anyone who is on the board, even if you are not present at the meeting, you can still vote to approve the minutes. So
Okay, thank you. So I will move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
and I'll second that.
All in favor?
I'll vote to say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So, gosh. Looks like the minutes are approved. So moving on to the public invited to be heard. I will now open it up for the public invited to be heard portion of the meeting. Each person wishing to speak will be unmuted to speak one at a time. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes to comment, and I will time you. Please do stop when I indicate that the time is up.
all right, we have two that I know of today, and the first up is Ben Sargent.
Hello, all. Ben Sargent. I live in the historic East Side. Homeowner here for about 7 years. Working now with a bunch of local farmers to get food to families. And right now we're planning to carry food down to East Denver Food Hub for consolidation there, aggregation. And I just was very curious about the mentioning of an agricultural hub at the old sugar mill. And curious to learn what you meant by that and what your intentions are. We'd love to be sort of a point user or perhaps controlling interest in a Longmont food hub, which is a USDA certified facility that's certified to handle food, and something that would be a great benefit to the small market farmers in the Longmont area. And so if you are interested and serious about pursuing that, really would like to learn more about what you're thinking, and perhaps provide input from the farmer community on what's needed and how to set that up.
Great. Thank you for that. And we will be hearing more in this meeting from staff members about the project at the old sugar mill. And so if you'll stick around for that, I'm sure there will be more information then.
Thank you.
And next up, we have John Greedy, who is with us.
Thank you. My name's John Greedy. My address is 714 Clarendon Drive, Longmont. I'm a homeowner as well. I've been here for about 12 years. And I too was curious about the sugar beet factory location and what is in the works. I've heard lots of different things and was also interested in the agricultural hub, food hub, and what that would basically entail, how that would support the local agriculture, and just curious if the committee is currently talking to any local farmers, and what we're doing to support sustainable local agriculture in our area.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you both for being here. And Hannah, can we expect that you'll address this question? You are, or Aaron will address this
Yeah,
question.
I feel slightly underqualified to address this on behalf of Aaron, but I will say agricultural hubs have been discussed, kind of agri-hoods, so neighborhoods that surround an agricultural production. What do they call them? Ghost kitchens, things like that have been discussed as part of the sub-area planning effort. We don't have any specific farmers or farmers markets or anything like that lined up, but it's definitely been discussed at the sub-area planning communications and engagement events that we've had, and it should be addressed in the ultimate sub-area plan. When we go through our presentation a little bit later tonight, we're going to be talking about some preferred alternatives for the various areas. I believe there's a mention of agriculture in there, although it's pretty high level, so I can't guarantee we're going to get into that level of detail, but it's certainly something we've discussed. And I would say not just local food production, but sustainable practices in a much broader scope as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hannah.
And Kate, I can be sure to pass along Ben and John's information to Aaron too for any communications that might be coming out that way.
Wonderful.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Heather.
Mhm.
Great. Okay. So agenda revisions and submission of documents. Are there any changes? Anything to bring up?
Yeah, we have a couple of things. If we could bump 10A, which is the,
That's the drought management plan.
yes, thank you very much. If we could bump that up to be the very first item whenever we're done with these items here, so before general business. And then if possible, if we could bump the sugar factory conversation till even after the conversation, the items from the board. Aaron, as I think Hannah mentioned, is going to be here later, probably closer to 5. And Hannah can definitely jump in until Aaron gets here, but if we could push that as late as possible, that would give us the best chance of having Aaron jump into that.
Perfect. Okay. Well, in that case, the water supply and drought management plan is the next item on the agenda. So
We've actually got Francie is going to take this one for
All right.
us.
Francie, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Last month, Ken attended the water board meeting and gave a high-level overview of the drought and water supply plan from last year. So I don't have a presentation for you all highlighting that at all. This board meeting. Instead, we in the packet, the 2022-2023 drought and water supply plan was provided for your review. Earlier this week, Water Board did concur with staff's recommendation to send this to City Council. So we're just looking for a hopefully quick vote from the board that the Sustainability Advisory Board also concurs with sending along this this drought and water supply master plan to City Council for approval. And Wes Lowry is here to answer any if you do end up having any questions.
Fantastic. Were there any questions from the board on the water supply and drought management plan that was provided in the packet? Adam.
Yeah, I had a question about the use of reclaimed water. I didn't see that in the plan at all, and I'm curious if the city intends to do something like that, if it's feasible at all.
Yeah, Adam, so this is Wes Lowry. Sorry I couldn't be with you guys with the screen, but with your question regarding reclaimed water. So Longmont typically talks about two different types of water. We talk about single-use water, which usually means water that goes into the treatment plants. Our customers use it. It then goes through to the wastewater treatment plant. Once it exits the wastewater treatment plant, it then is owed back to the St. Vrain Creek. The other type is fully consumable water. And fully consumable water is water that through our change case decrees, we've been allowed to use that water to extinction. So what happens is Longmont will take water up into its Nelson Flanders water treatment plant. It'll be used by the customers. There'll be a certain amount of that water that'll return back to the wastewater treatment plant. That amount of water is quantified, it's measured, and then we can either physically deliver it we can deliver it to Union via an exchange to Union Reservoir, or we can take that water and we can lease it. So, or exchange it with other users downstream. So we have a fairly robust reuse, supply and lease agreements that we use, and that is integrated into this in kind of it's not actually part of the table A, which is kind of one of the primary pieces that water board and staff and council look at, but it is a part of our overall supply. So it is taken into consideration. And what I can tell you is, generally speaking, we use at least 95% of our available fully consumable water through either requirements for our different decrees or for our leases and exchange agreements. So it's definitely taken into consideration, and we definitely take full use of it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Wes. The answer was really helpful. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Other questions, thoughts from the board?
I have a question. I would like to see an elucidation of what happens with the biosolids that result from the wastewater treatment. And I know that they are sold or given to a facility that's out in east of Denver, and they have farms, and I'm concerned that those biosolids are being used on farms, and I would like to know what the actual result is. I did ask this question of a council member, and the response that I got was, we don't know what happens with them after they leave, that, what happens to this important part of our waste stream after it leaves the city's hands. And I didn't feel like that was a sustainably rigorous answer.
Mary, I can jump in. More to say that that is, we would need to reach out to someone from our wastewater treatment plant to come back and answer that question. I do not think, and Wes, if you know the answer, feel free to jump in, but the biosolids piece is usually not part of this water supply and drought management plan.
Sure, I understand, but it's all part of the cycle of what happens with, our part of use of water as a civilization, and I think that it's important to know.
I can tell you that the destination and all the testing records and stuff like that should be probably on file with the HMWMD, with the CDPHE's Hazardous Waste Division. They do have a biosolids division that's run by, I think his name is Tim Larson. And the permitting for the land application is pretty rigorous, that they have to go through. And so typically what happens when it's going to a facility that's processing post-plant is that it's going to be baked and processed in a manner to kill all bacteria and stuff like that, so that it can be used for application as well. The state prohibits it being used on, I want to say, crops for human consumption. So it could be used on like hay fields or stuff like that that's used for agricultural use, but the state will prohibit it being used for anything as far as human consumption goes.
I understand that, Kay.
Yeah.
However, it is used on hayfields, which are then used to feed livestock, and it's very, very, very high in heavy metal contaminants. And I understand that you're saying that it's baked or goes through some kind of pyrolysis. However, I would like to see the testing that demonstrates that the accumulation of toxic organic compounds has truly been eliminated before it's been applied. And I'd like to know if it's being used within the city of Longmont on any of the agricultural fields here.
Councilmember Martin has her hand raised, and do you have an answer to these questions?
Yes, I am the person who referred the Mary's original question to our waste diversion organization, and they sent back around a pretty thorough answer, which is, essentially the same one that Kay just gave. It is baked. We use a licensed contractor, and the resulting biosolids are permitted for agricultural use for non-human consumption. And it can't be used in Boulder County because essentially all the farms that use byproducts here are organic. So nobody would buy them, and they are actually they are processed on the Eastern Plains, and it's for hay and other animal crops. And the processor the contractor that we use, I believe, was in Mary's reply, but if it wasn't, it is on file, as Kay said.
I was going to say, which contractor are we using? Is it?
I don't remember, but if you give me a couple minutes, I'll raise my hand again and see if Charlie told me.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can always help to track down the permit if you want me to.
I would appreciate
that, Kay.
I will absolutely dig in.
So, did I understand, correctly, Marcia, that, it is not used in, Boulder County on any hayfields, or that you're not sure about that? Or
I
on
don't,
any prep field?
um, I didn't ask that particular question, but given that it is processed and shipped east, I can't imagine why anyone would ship it back. And it is not certified for organic use. So nobody who was doing organic farming or any farming for human consumption would buy it.
Well, I mean, there's an awful lot of farming in Boulder County that isn't for human consumption. I mean, the Board of Commissioners just basically jettisoned, organic farming on the county open land. I mean, it's all being used for GMO sugar crops and so forth. So, I mean, I wouldn't make any assumptions in that regard about Boulder County.
I will say that if it's registering above, RCRA soil levels, that they cannot apply it. They have to dispose of it by landfill or other. They cannot do a biosolids application of it. The state will not approve it.
Yeah, what I will say is that the processing agent does not report back to Longmont as to where they sell the products of their processing. So
I have heard that it's being
happening
used in
there.
local fields, so I would like to find out if it is, and I would like to know what the, certification process is for making sure that it does not have, heavy metal or organic, toxin contaminants.
Understood. Thank you. I'd like to bring us back to the topic at hand, which is the wastewater, water supply and drought management plan, not the wastewater. And I wonder if there, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to say one thing. I'm sorry, I had my hand raised, but
sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. Annie Noble, Environmental Services Manager. And what I wanted to say, Mary Lynn, is that we're required to file an annual report on our biosolids where we test all the metals. And I could provide you with a copy of that report if that would.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you, Annie.
Okay. That would save me the legwork of looking it up.
Okay, I'll do that.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks all. Adam, I see your hand raised. Oh, Adam, you're talking on mute.
Sorry about that. I have another question. I understand that this is mainly about responding to droughts. So I don't know if this question is entirely relevant. So please let me know and we can defer it to later. But it's related to our watersheds. And I'm wondering, does the city have any mitigation plans for events where wildfires contaminate the water in our watersheds?
So I'll try to at least start that conversation. So we do have a Button Rock Preserve is wholly owned by the city of Longmont. So we have a active forest management plan that's been in the process for the last close to 20 years. So we've went through and described certain areas within that we've been doing different types of forest management prescriptions. As such, it's created some, it's addressed some of the potential fire concerns. There's a number of private residents that are in there, and private individual holdings, and they're going to, of course, be responsible for their own. I do know that we're working very closely with the Colorado State Forest, the U.S. Forest Service, Boulder County, in lands that they would be responsible for to try to have a more coordinated effort. And so we're doing on our property what we can and have been for quite some time to address the potential and limit the potential fire impacts. And then additionally, we're working on coordinating with the other local agencies that surround us and the private landowners to have a more comprehensive approach. Beyond that, one of the best people to speak to would be Price Hadley. He's the senior watershed ranger up at Button Rock, and he's kind of the primary contact employee for overseeing that.
Thank you. Yeah, Francie.
Yeah, and if I could just add, beyond just Button Rock and the work that Wes was mentioning, our emergency response staff also work on a hazard mitigation plan. That is a Boulder County-wide plan that Longmont contributes to. And there actually were additions and edits after the fires earlier this year to kind of reassess the risk of fire on our community, and some additions were added as acknowledgements of there's risk to that hazard mitigation plan.
Yep, thanks, Francie. Thanks, Wes, for the answers.
Great. Oh, yikes. Sorry. Working on one screen here. And just learned about a new grass fire that is not far from my house. And I'm feeling, I'm not going to lie, a little nervous. Let's see. So I think, are there any other questions on the plan as presented? Are we at the point where we can make a motion to approve it?
I move that we vote to approve the plan as presented.
Thank you. Any seconds? I will second that. So all in favor? All opposed? Are you abstaining, Mary?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. All right. Then then we can move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the draft zero waste resolution. Lisa, oh yes, sorry, Francis.
Yeah, before we move on, Chair, if it's okay, since we're on the topic of water, we 2 weeks ago hired a full-time water conservation position. So I just wanted, if it's okay, use this time to introduce Hope Bartlett to the board. She will be taking over our water conservation programs, and I'll be moving into a full-time sustainability position.
Fantastic. Welcome, Hope.
Hope, do you want to jump on and say hi? Let people see your face.
Hi, everyone. I'm just figuring out if I can. Okay. I think I was granted permissions. So great. Yes, I'm Hope Bartlett. I'm the new full-time water conservation specialist, as Francie mentioned, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all. As the first full-time position, I think that there's going to be a lot more capacity for me to do a lot more projects. So hopefully you'll be seeing me more in the future. But it's nice to meet all of you, and thank you so much.
Fantastic. We're excited that you've joined the team. Welcome.
Yes, thanks.
Marcia, I see your hand.
Yes, and thanks to Charlie Canamides, who just put the whole email string from Mary at the top of my mailbox. It's Veris Environmental. We bake our waste processing solids to Class B compliance here before having them hauled away and further process it. And the destination, at least the primary destination, is fields east of DIA. That's as much as far as we got in the string. But if Kay wants to look at their permitting and see what else happens, I thought I'd get that in there before we start a new topic.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marcia. Appreciate
And
it.
thank Charlie.
And Charlie. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
And welcome, Faith.
So Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you all. That was an interesting conversation. Okay, so I have a couple of slides and then I sent you all the very rough draft of our updated zero waste resolution. So Heather, if you would pull up the slides for me, that would be great. And I did learn that Erin is on, so we can go to the sugar factory conversation after this one and then jump into the conversation. Okay, you can move to the next slide, please. Thanks. And you can actually hit forward. There's a couple animations. Yep. So this is just a reminder of the 4 areas that council directed us to continue to expand or accelerate. And the one I'll be talking to you about most today is the zero waste resolution.
Lisa, could you speak up a little?
Yeah, I'm gonna try. It's gonna make my face very large because I have to get right up to the computer because my other computer is in service. So is that okay? Can you all hear me okay? Okay, holler at any time if you can't. And I'm just gonna apologize to the recording for my extra large face. Okay, so you can move to the next slide, please. So just a reminder of the timeline. So we actually started this process last year. So we did a lot of the background logistics research, put together a draft outline that I brought to you all last year. We did run into some staff turnover issues, which prolonged that process, but I think we were able to catch up and we're still pretty well on track. So we started the stakeholder engagement process in November. That's ongoing. We just took an update to council in, what was that, probably February, I guess. That was a month or 2 ago. We're in the process of doing our data analysis right now, which I'll talk a little bit more shortly. That'll all get incorporated into a final draft resolution. We'll do one more round of stakeholder engagement before bringing that to council at the end of June. And then we'll move into the development of the universal recycling ordinance. And just a reminder for folks, the stakeholder engagement process is helping to inform the development not only of the zero waste resolution, but it's giving us information and feedback around high-level issues and barriers and opportunities that are also integrated into the into the universal recycling ordinance. And then a lot of the targets and any recommendations and whatnot that come out of those processes will also be incorporated into the update to the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan and Sustainability Plan updates. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the left-hand side, this is the outline that I brought to you all last year of the zero waste resolution. The items that are listed in gray are the items that were incorporated in the original 2008 resolution, and we're just updating to be catch up with the times a little bit, although there was a lot of really good information in there, so we are still keeping a lot of that. And then the items in green are the items that are going to be incorporated that weren't necessarily captured in the original resolution. One of the primary things is having the inclusion of some really specific goals and targets that we want to incorporate into the resolution, so it has more teeth and more commitment to it. So as you look through the draft resolution that I sent, you'll see those as headers within the document. Those will be taken out when it becomes the final resolution format. I just wanted to have those in there so you can see how this outline was really how we built the content out based on this outline. And then on the right-hand side, those are the guiding principles that we've been utilizing to help guide our work in this process. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've been in the stakeholder engagement process. We've met with a lot of folks. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. It's also been pretty consistent what we've been hearing. So there are a lot of themes that are coming out of that that I'll touch on as I go through the resolution. But we've met with a lot of city staff folks that are going to be really important in supporting the implementation of this work, as well as folks that are really directly impacted by this. So we want to make sure we get feedback from those folks so that they're not blindsided as this comes out. So Parks and Rec folks, obviously, facilities, planning and code enforcement, our crime-free multi-family housing program, community neighborhood resources folks, and then event permitting. We've met with a number of boards, so not only this board, but the Senior Citizens Advisory Board and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. A number of external partners, so the Boulder County Partners for a Clean Environment, a number of economic development partners, the Boulder Realtors Group, and then a number of city staff from other organizations, so City of Boulder, City of Fort Collins, and Boulder County. So meeting with other cohorts from regional communities who have done some of this work already so that we can help learn from those folks that have gone before us and really tap into their insight and expertise in these areas. And those have been really helpful conversations as well. And then community folks, including the Equitable Climate Action Team, Sustainable Resilient Longmont, and then we have an Engaged Longmont page. We put out information via Facebook. And then we have a couple of community events coming up that will be present at Earth Day this weekend, which hopefully folks are planning to attend, as well as the Lanyon Park resource fair and some Cinco de Mayo coming up recently. And Francie and Charlie, please feel free to jump in if you want to add anything at any time that I'm missing. Yeah, Charlie.
I think one of the stakeholder engagements you didn't talk about was that we met with the haulers of our region.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I thought that was a pretty important one as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Charlie. I could tell by the look on your face that you wanted to add something. So yeah, that was a really great meeting to meet with our haulers and have a really good conversation with them about what they would need to help support this effort as well. A lot of them are also serve communities that have similar requirements. So that conversation was very, very insightful for us. Okay, so all of that. Next slide, Heather. Thank you. Okay, I think we can go through this real quick and then we'll pull up the draft resolution. So as I mentioned, we're in the process of drafting we have a draft resolution now. We have integrated those guiding principles, the stakeholder input, as I mentioned, from all those different folks, and we're not finished with that, but this is where we're at this point in time. And then we're also working with a consultant to do some data analysis, really looking at those two scenarios that were identified in our waste life cycle analysis around increasing our waste diversion rates in the residential as well as the commercial sectors. And that includes like construction and demolition, and how that impacts our greenhouse gas emissions or avoided greenhouse gas emissions. And so they're taking those two scenarios and doing some data analysis around what programs and policies we would need to put in place to meet either of those scenarios and what we could expect ballpark around a cost implications for those programs and policies. And that'll be part of the conversation that we will bring back to council. You know, if we want to increase our diversion targets, this is what we would need to put into place. So we'll have that draft resolution that will go to council at the end of June and talk through some of that with them. And then it should be pretty final at that point in time. But there may need to be some tweaks based on that feedback from council. And then the second half of the year, we'll move into that universal recycling ordinance that will go to council at the end of the year. All right, so with that, Heather, if you can pull up that resolution. Great. All right, so hopefully you all had a chance to look through this. It was included in your packet. It is pretty long, and so my caveat to this is right now, as I mentioned, it's a very rough draft. Mostly we are trying to get everything from our stakeholder feedback kind of in there to make sure that we captured everything correctly, that we're not missing anything big. We're kind of circling through with folks, and then after this, we'll go do some cleanup and some consolidation, but we want to make sure that we're starting from a solid foundation in terms of our feedback first. So I'm not going to read through all of this, but if you kind of scroll through, Heather, the first piece is that background, just noting a bunch of our accomplishments from 2008 and really give a lot of credit to Charlie and the amazing work that he's done since 2008 to really continue to bump up our residential waste diversion rates and focus on that education and outreach piece. And then of course in 2016, we have the sustainability plan, which identified some of those initial residential targets, and then the climate action recommendations report, which called for some more focus on waste diversion as well as specifically composting. The overall issue of waste, how it impacts our community, the environment, as well as the tie to climate action. And you can keep scrolling down to there, Heather. Thank you. The existing conditions, so we just dropped in the current information about what tonnage of waste is generated currently, what gets diverted to landfill, and what our current diversion rates are. You can see in particular, oops, scroll up a little bit there, Heather. Yeah, so currently, as you all know, what we got to recently, 42%. We have a residential diversion rate of 42%, which is great and on track to meeting our 50% by 2025. But currently, from the current data we have, only 22% of our commercial waste and only 2% of our construction demolition waste is being recycled. So we know we have some big opportunities in that area. And then if you want to scroll down, this is where this barriers piece is really where it gets into, oh, okay, stop, I'm sorry. The feedback from our stakeholders. So, let's scroll just a little bit more, Heather, please. Oh, sorry, yep. Thank you. So this is where a lot of that feedback from our stakeholders really comes in. And a lot of those themes were really around increasing access. So really focusing on large multifamily, access in places, you know, like parks, facilities, and then also access to increased opportunities for like hard to recycle materials and things that you can't necessarily just throw in your curbside bin. So those were common barriers that we heard. Cost is a common barrier that we heard. And then also that awareness piece. So we know that there's still a lot of confusion for folks around what can be recycled and composted and where do people put certain recyclable and compostable items. You know, if you can scroll down there, we have some barriers that are noted from our municipal staff, which is also a really important component. Okay, and then you can continue to scroll down. Just the value proposition of, you know, why is it important for us in terms of community benefits and impact to climate. So there's a number of things listed in there. Scroll down. Some guiding principles. You can continue to scroll down. And then this is where it gets into our goals and commitments. And then this, as I mentioned, so we listed some kind of placeholder pieces here. So we have our existing residential waste diversion target, the 50% by 2025. We do have a target in the sustainability plan for increasing city operations and commercial waste diversion, but we don't have a specific target associated with those. So these are the things that will be revised and potentially additional targets added based on that data analysis that's underway. So this piece will have more substance to it the next time we bring this to you. So further, again, some of our actions that we will utilize to then reach those targets. Obviously, these could be revised or added to, again, based on the data analysis, but so far based on our stakeholder input process, this is what we put together. So some overarching actions, like obviously that top one being the universal recycling ordinance, a lot of feedback again around incentives or discounts to really support that cost piece. And then a really big focus on the education and the outreach piece to make sure that folks know, again, what they can recycle and compost and where and how they go about doing that. And then that last piece, really focusing on, well, I guess not, oops, sorry, Heather, you can stop there. That's fine. Continue to focus on partnerships with folks like the St. Vrain Valley School District for the Great Star Schools program. And then the accessibility piece. So looking at how do we really make sure that everybody has the ability to participate in waste diversion efforts. All right, you can scroll down there. And then this is the section that I imagine is going to get cleaned up and consolidated quite a bit. But again, in the residential sector, making sure that we have that accessibility for multifamily and affordable housing, looking at some different policies around fees and pay as you throw, potentially creating some additional options around composting and recycling. And then you can scroll down here, the commercial piece, supporting businesses and restaurants and other businesses and transitioning away from things like styrofoam, working with the business community to support zero waste, and then the municipal operations piece. And there's a number of components in there, and really making it easier and more accessible also for our municipal staff to divert waste, as well as a focus really on reuse and reduction as well. Okay, let's go down. And then the focus on the equity recommendations. So continuing to make sure as we move forward into implementation that we are taking those equity considerations into account. So that's where things are at. I really wanted to talk through with you all, again, to just make sure that based on the feedback that you all have given, that things are adequately captured, that there's not any big flags or anything that you think is misrepresented or missing. And then, like I said, it is a rough draft, and we are looking forward to that data analysis piece, which I think is going to be a really useful and important component to have. Francie and Charlie, is there anything that you all want to add before we get into feedback from folks? Okay.
You did a good job with the overview.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second that. Great job with the overview. This is really impressive work. I did look through the resolution and I didn't see anything about plastic bags. I might have missed it. And so I'm wondering, do those fall under single-use plastics?
Yep.
Or if not, okay, great. And actually, maybe I'll ask my second question quickly. I noticed that compost was opt-in. What would the consequences be if we're opt-out? Because I think if it were opt-out, then a lot more people will be more aware of composting. But I wonder if that comes with the trade-off of you have to have more cost to the city, because you probably have to do things like provide more bins and so on.
Charlie.
Adam, that's a great question, and I hope I can answer it well enough for everybody. I think the first offset would be there's a cost to it, and how do we offer that? How do we compensate for that? Right? Do we charge residents? Is it taken out of somehow? So that would be the big conversation around that. And I think we saw in the resolution a component in there as a suggestion is potentially embed the cost of composting into the trash rate, just like we do with recycling. So with some sensitivity around equity and the economy, I think council's made some mention to awareness around that, but I think that's the biggest piece there. And second to that, Adam, I would just throw out as a holler that, with outreach and education, that's real important to ensure that we teach people that that's not a second trash can. We would not want to be collecting plastics in our composting, but those are not challenges that are insurmountable.
Great, thanks, Charles.
And I wanted to jump in and say that Kay had a really good, I asked a very similar question at a recent meeting, and Kay had a really good anecdote about her husband putting a plastic bag full of recycling or some trash, something, into the compost bin.
It was the leaves. We had raked the leaves into a plastic bag for pickup by the city and missed it. And those bags were there. So we slowly were loading them into the compost. And my husband, me sitting on the board, went and took the plastic bag of leaves and he threw 3 of them in my compost bag. So I got the pleasure of going in and digging through and peeling it out. And so there is the complication in that is that even with me living with my husband and explaining this a lot, it doesn't always stick to people who aren't ready to make it stick. And so what happens is you're going to end up with more contamination if you ask people to opt out or force people to opt out, and it ends up on everybody's porch. I'm going to say, my father-in-law was kind enough to rake my front yard, and I said, oh, well, that can go in the car. Just put it in the trash, because I was going, there is no way my 75-year-old father-in-law is not going to pull out the string the various things that my kids have been crafting with all over my front yard. I'm gonna find paint cans in there tomorrow. He's gonna go hit the garage with it if I'm not careful and just start cleaning my garage into this. And so the thing with the opt-out versus having people opt in is if people are not ready, you're gonna have a lot more cross-contamination, which is gonna lead to higher costs at the facility. It may lead to a greater amount still going into the landfills anyway. And then also the other point was if you drive by some of these multi-housing units where they have trash and recycling bins out all day, when you add a third bin to every single one of those, I use the example of the apartments that are on 17th Avenue, kind of towards, I want to say, it's like towards like Princess Avenue or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a row of trash, recycle. And to add a compost, you're gonna have apartment owners that are gonna be, or complexes are gonna say, I don't have room for this. So there's some things that have to still be worked out with that. I'd love to encourage it, but those are my pessimistic views.
If I should just add that in there, those are the comments that we need to hear clearly so that we can have those open and honest conversations. Thank you.
I was going to say that's why I sit on this board, is so you guys get that lovely extra input.
I just have to say that I so much value your input as a viewpoint that doesn't always agree with mine, and you always make me think, and I really value that. Thank you.
I was like, I love it. I learned so much from all of you on things that I don't think of, and I don't work in sustainability. I work in regulations and waste and stuff like that. And so for me, this is always refreshing and new, really cool information. But I see what industry does. I see what commercial, what those businesses are going to struggle with. And so I try to, bring that point of view for you.
Thank you. Robert, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I was going to add that I'm a big fan of the recommendation to continue the Green Star Schools program. I think that's excellent. I was really glad to see that. And then, yeah, I had a similar line of concerns that we've been talking about, is really the unintended consequences of some of these changes. Like increasing the pay as you throw rates as a way to sort of compensate for some of the changes and to encourage a better use of your waste through recycling and compost. What do we think the unintended consequences of that will be? Decreased revenue? Have we analyzed what the effects of that would be? And then, of course, like everyone's saying, the contamination of those recycling and composting streams. You said it's not an insurmountable obstacle, but what tactics do we recommend to try to help educate the community about that?
I'll take that, Lisa. So thank you, Robert. That's a great question. And I think it's also bullet pointed through our resolution and we've heard it from council, outreach and education, a real strong outreach and education program, continuing our program with like our Recollect and our Waste Wizard and those sorts of things, but definitely the outreach and education, and I didn't mean to flippantly say it was insurmountable. Please don't accept it that way. I just meant to say that we're not the first ones around the communities to do curbside composting. And there is going to be some challenges. And, I can speak for my drivers that do compost are very conscientious, and they actually, we have cameras on the truck and they look at what they're picking up, and we have outreach that we do at the curb as well. And I think that there'll be some levels of that continuing, right? Look what's out there. Let's work with EcoCycle. Let's work with all these other SRL. Let's work with everybody to get the word out there that what is compostable and what's recyclable. There's a hill to climb there, but that's what I mean by that. It's a good challenge. It was very similar to recycling. When recycling started many years ago, decades ago, it was similar. People putting trash in there. And your question around pay-as-you-throw rates, there are some unintended consequences, right? Because there's a cost increase to a bigger can costs more than a smaller can. But I hope that the message is more, you can control your rates a little better by diverting your waste, right? So if you get a compost cart and a smaller trash cart, then instead of paying $24, you're paying less, and so forth. But when it comes to our business, we run and work with our consultants, and we talk about the projections of the split of different rate scenarios so that we're not getting underwater, so to speak, with our funds. So we run a lean, mean machine with solid waste here, and we probably don't charge enough, I would say, at some points, but we charge plenty to cover the costs and the services that we provide.
Thank you.
Marcia. Wait, Mary, you had your hand up. Did you get yours?
I took it down for the sake of time. I just wanted to, my comment was just going to be, if there was literally a place that we could put bio waste, bio sludge as a solid waste that needs to be diverted from the stream, it would be here. And I understand that the city thinks of it in a different category, but I do think that I just looked up Class B biosolids. They're really toxic, and they're still loaded with living pathogens and lots of organic biosolids, organic contaminants, organic compounds. So we probably have to come back to this another point, but I did want to register that comment.
Thanks, Mary.
May I jump in real quick? And Mary, you have great concerns. I want to be clear that the solid waste from the biosolid wastewater treatment plant is a different program to some extent from the solid waste.
Right,
program.
that's what I just said.
Okay,
But,
good.
and
Thank
I
you
would
so
like
much.
to be able to, and it doesn't seem like it's, this committee hears about water conservation. It hears about waste diversion from the voluntary, trash removal and hauling, but it just feels like it's sort of an orphan thing, and it's a big deal, because if there was any other waste that was being produced by residents and businesses in the city that was as toxic as biosludge, we would be dealing with it in a very significantly different way. But anyway, we can move on.
I'm happy to talk with you on biosolids offline if you want. I spent the last 2 years working on the decommissioning of
Okay, that would be great, Kay. Thank you.
So I've been involved in trying to see what can get permitted as far as Class A and Class B for a lagoon up north that was closed. And I can hook you up with the analytical profiles, and also a good person to talk to. I would recommend, if you have lots of good questions on biosolids, talking with Tim Larson at the state, who does audit every single one of those permits.
Okay,
So,
I'm just
but I'm
concerned
happy
that
to
it's
touch
being
base with
used
you.
in people's, being used in fields and in the national forest and in parks and so forth. I just looked it up. The CDC says more than 50% of that stuff is being used, and it's still pretty toxic, and it's dangerous to the people who are applying it and who are around it. But we'll talk offline.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. Thanks. Marcia, your turn.
Yes, I have a comment about waste diversion in terms of composting and recycling, which is, if we change over to opt-in or we do pay as you throw, I do want to make sure, since the landscape of who will process our waste products has changed, it's more expensive to recycle even good recyclables. We've just been talking about all the issues around composting. I do want to make sure that we consider two things, which is the carbon footprint of the processes that we use in waste diversion. And I'm doing this more for the benefit of the board than I am for Charlie, because I'm sure he knows that already. But that's a thing that we have to keep good track of. And the other thing is that all of this stuff, because the cost of end-to-end processing has increased in recent years, and we're also doing other things about reducing our carbon footprint that are in some ways more urgent, that we have raised utility rates on other services a lot because of that. So I hope we can when we have to increase the cost of consumer waste diversion, we can do it at a time when the other rate increases are taking a vacation and things have been flat for a while. Oh, and then I wanted to ask Kay, is the toxicity, since, or Mary for that matter, the toxicity of biosolids due to the concentration of them? Because, at the same time that we're talking about this, we're putting disposable diapers in landfills. So what's up with that? Are just, poopy disposable diapers not very toxic because they're not very concentrated?
I'm like, well, yeah, I happily answer any of your questions. I've got 2 landfills I'm working on right now. I want to say with the landfills, you're obviously constructed with leachate collection systems and various other things, so that it's a different concern. It's a groundwater concern and it's a protection concern, and the design should cover that. Versus the biosolids being a human waste. I want to say your toxicity as far as metals and VOCs is dependent on your waste streams coming in. So yeah, I would say if you're looking at exclusively a domestic waste, it shouldn't be in there. If you're accepting wastes from, metals processing facilities and various industries, you're going to get those contaminants in there. I want to say there's a difference between Class A and Class B, and actually it's not. The Class B is a waste that goes to a specific location that is permitted, and a Class A is the compost that has to be processed and tested to much lower limits, because that means it's for commercial sale. So like if I had a Class A facility, Mary, I would take my biosolids, compost them here, and they have to be so low in concentrations I could sell them to a school to apply. So the Class A biosolid is the one that's being distributed. The Class B is contracted to the farmer. Or sold to the farmer or brought to the farmer. So I want to say that there's, I mean, toxicity is always dependent on what went into the waste to start.
And it's also dependent on exposure. Right? When it's distributed in a thin layer on top of a field, and anyone can come in contact with that field, you can be exposed.
It's required to be injected at a minimum of 6 to 12 inches below the surface.
Okay.
So yeah, they can't put it just right on top.
But even so, I mean, it's loaded with bacteria, helminthic, parasitic worms. I mean, it's got if people are pouring paint down the drain, and which people do. I mean, how much actually diverted toxic chemicals do we have people voluntarily bringing to, the waste center in Boulder? All of that stuff ends up in the solids, and it's not all. I mean, it would have to be pyrolyzed. It would have to actually be burned to the point where there wasn't recognizable organic compounds in order to.
Yes, and they have sampling frequencies and statistical analysis, and you have to have under a certain percentage has to be under the limit. I want to say, I can pull it up. You're going to look for the 503s. I can send you.
As we said, we can talk about this later.
It's really complicated. All I know is I looked into running the permitting and the sampling on a facility, and I immediately just said you should go hire Barris or Denali to do this, because it would cost me $40,000 to sample 100 by 100 foot pond. So it's a pretty extensive suite, I want to say, overall. And I can talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you.
At another time, but yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put it in my own vegetable garden. I will guarantee you that.
Would you like to live next door to a farmer's field where it was being spread? And would you eat the beef that was eating that hay?
Would I eat the beef that ate that hay? I want to say I don't think it's going to go up into the plant necessarily.
What, heavy metals? Sure they do. Well, anyway, we
Yes,
can talk
but
about
I
this
was gonna
later.
say, we can talk about this, that is on
Yeah.
an offline, I think is better, because this could be a long conversation, but like I said,
I
they
appreciate your
won't
offer.
accept, they won't accept, they won't accept it if it's toxic. It has to go to a certain incineration and then to landfill at that point. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move us back to the agenda.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But I did have a question about extended producer responsibility. And are we planning to have EPR measures for like businesses in Longmont? It mentioned regional and state efforts, I think in the draft. And I just wonder if you could talk about what that looks like here for a minute. Either of you.
Want to jump in on that one?
Did you call on me, Lisa? I didn't hear you. So the Recycle Colorado and two House reps are putting forward extended producer responsibility legislation that would cover the state of Colorado. So the answer would be more simple, that if it does pass, it would follow over the state of Colorado. And there's a lot of good and interesting and different pieces about the EPR legislation, but the end of the day is allowing producers to pay for their product ahead of time so that materials can be recycled. So without getting too deep into it, I'm happy to get somebody from Recycle Colorado. Another hat I wear, just so everybody knows, I'm the president of the board of directors for Recycle Colorado. And I'm also still the chair of Resource Conservation Advisory Board. I end that term next month for Boulder County. But I'm happy to get someone if you would like. I'll work with Lisa to have somebody present to the board if you'd like more information on extended producer responsibility and all those details.
Yeah, thanks for that offer. If we can fit it into our very packed agenda at some point, I think that I would be interested.
Can I send you just some, through Lisa, some links to a website that gets the pros and cons to it, and then she can distribute that out.
That'd be great. Thank you. So for the purposes of this meeting, on this draft resolution, are you looking for a vote from us at this point? No.
No, I'm just making sure we're, on track. But like I said, there wasn't anything that folks felt like was missing or anything like that. So we're just moving forward. As I said, our next steps are wrapping up our stakeholder engagement, the data analysis piece, and then we'll do cleanup and consolidation, and you all will see a final resolution before it goes to council at the end of June. So that's it, unless there's anything big, like I said, that folks want to say, oh no, you're absolutely missing this piece. Folks brought up some really great points. Marsha, I did just want to circle back to your comment of making sure to take into account the full life cycle of waste, and the waste life cycle analysis does exactly that. So the model that we use takes into account all of those components as we do that analysis. So stay tuned for more.
Perfect. Since you're here, Charlie, in last month's board meeting, I took a minute to plug the amazing Waste Wizard on the Longmont app. And I just think it's amazing. And anyone who doesn't have the Longmont app should get it. Use the Waste Wizard. It's the best thing in the world.
Thank you, Kate. And that's always a work in progress, right? There's a link in there that you can say, I don't see this there, and you can let us know, and I'll do the research and figure it out.
It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. If there are no more comments on the draft resolution, then draft resolution. Yes.
Quick comment that I loved how thorough it was. So thank you for putting it together. Looks it's coming along well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Well done to the staff. Thanks all. And now it's time to hear about the sugar factory and steam. Aaron, I think you're here, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi. Hello. Thank you for having me back. And thank you, Heather, for pulling up the presentation. So we chatted with the Sustainability Advisory Board a couple months ago and shared some preliminary information. Since that time, we've continued to do a bit of work. Probably would have preferred to maybe talk with you next month when we had a little bit more, but we just went to council and shared some alternatives. So that's really what I'm going to focus on tonight. I'm also joined by my colleague Hannah Mulroy, who I think addressed some questions in the beginning of the meeting related to this project. So she may jump in if she has some input to add. Next slide, please. So just want to ground us and recap where we are in the process. As I mentioned when we spoke last time, we have a lot of prior work in both the sugar factory and steam areas. And so we're really using those as a base for this effort and building on those prior studies. And, you know, I can remind you all what those are, but primarily the visioning that council has done for the steam area, the Urban Land Institute technical advisory report that was done for the sugar factory, and then some of our broad planning documents like the sustainability plan, Envision Longmont, the Main Street Corridor Plan, and others are really providing the basis for this. We've spent some time over the past several months coming up with existing conditions, talking to property owners and developers. I think we mentioned last time that we did submit a grant application to start preparing for the cleanup of the sugar factory, and we've been doing some community outreach as well. We have developed some plan priorities, which I'll remind you of here in just a second. And as I mentioned, we've been spending the last several weeks really coming up with some alternatives based on the previous work to date. So that will all help inform a preferred plan that we hope to present to City Council early this summer. Next slide, please. So these are draft, we were calling them goals and strategies. You know, we did have some feedback from some folks on council and I think others in the community as well as the project team that these aren't truly goals in the way that some people think of goals. So we really shifted this and we're looking at calling these plan priorities. And as we think about that, we've also done some language changing, which isn't super critical to know, but I'll mention what it is. So we do think housing is incredibly important and we want to make sure we're planning for a variety of housing types at a range of price points. And we're really hopeful that that would include ownership opportunities as well. We know that's really important to City Council. Thinking about transportation, we know that continues to be of utmost importance, and thinking about not only how do we provide options locally within the study area, but how do we think about regional connections? So connections to other neighborhoods within Longmont and then connections to the broader region as well. As we think about the development interests that are here, how do we integrate the local development and redevelopment that we know is going to occur here to help enrich the community character of this area and frankly of Longmont? We also have heard from folks, including City Council, that arts and culture are extremely important here and a great way to build community. So how can we encourage cultural arts and community hubs for creativity that really support innovation and placemaking? And then finally, as I'm sure this board is very interested in, thinking about sustainability and really how do we advance sustainable building and development practices and focus on that ongoing community resilience in a number of different areas. Next slide, please. So just as a quick reminder before we show alternatives, we do have one study area that encompasses about 275 acres in sort of south and southeast Longmont, central Longmont. But there are two distinct districts. And so you'll hear us talk about and you'll see alternatives for steam area, which is generally that area south of 3rd, close proximity to downtown, north of Dickens Farm Nature Area and west of Martin. The sugar factory obviously encompasses the historic sugar factory and kind of the areas around it. But primarily when we say sugar factory, we're talking about those areas kind of northeast of the wastewater treatment plant, east of Martin Street, and sort of south and kind of in the T-bone area of East 3rd and East Kim-Pratt Boulevard, northwest of Mill Village. So we are looking at these as distinct areas, but we're also really thinking about what are some of those complementary attributes and what do we need to look at together, for example, connectivity. There are some commonalities between these two study areas, and I think it's important to mention those. So both have some certainly underutilized areas. They're both adjacent to the St. Vrain Greenway and the open space system that really exists along the Greenway to the south of the study area. They both have some really incredible gateway elements. The sugar factory, has that gateway for the whole entire city as you're coming in from the east, while the steam area really provides a great gateway to downtown. And then obviously there's multiple property owners throughout this study area, which provides some different types of opportunities. So we've taken a look at all this, as well as input from the community, direction from council, and in talking with staff, and come up with some alternatives. And I want to just go through those with you real quick, and then I'll tell you how we're going to use that information. If you could go to the next slide, please. I'll kind of skip over this. If you go to the next slide, Heather. We spent quite a bit of time doing community surveying, and we did a community forum on Zoom. I think maybe some of you may have participated in that. This really sort of underestimates the amount of feedback that we've gotten from the community, so I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but suffice it to say, we've gotten a lot of feedback on the community really wants to see adaptive reuse and preservation of the sugar factory itself. Really interested in supporting multimodal connectivity and how can we make better and safer bike and pedestrian access, and really thinking about using trails, thinking about urban agriculture, thinking about regional transit hubs, thinking about culture, arts and innovation, performing arts, live music. So we've seen a lot of this, and I can talk about some of that as we go through the alternatives. Next slide, please. So thinking about connectivity, this is sort of a confusing graphic, and I apologize for that. So in our next presentation, we'll do better. But really what's important to know here is that we've been thinking about connectivity and really thinking about how can we connect this area, both within the study area and again, to the rest of Longmont. And so some of the things that we're thinking about that we know need to happen regardless of what alternatives we choose is that there's a real opportunity with 3rd Avenue to enhance 3rd, particularly for active modes. And so obviously 3rd Avenue does accommodate all modes now, but it really prioritizes vehicles. And so how could we think differently about 3rd Avenue? And how could we make some of those crossings, particularly as we think about accessing the sugar factory district, more safe? We've heard from folks that it's not the easiest crossing. We also think that extending Emory to create some more connectivity within the STEAM area is going to be something that is really important, and that connection should be made all the way to Boston. That really opens up some incredible development opportunities with some of the parcels, the underutilized parcels that are in that area now. We think that we know that there's going to be some need to look at rail crossings. There's a lot of rail crossings in this area. Some of them are, it's challenging to close rail crossings. It's challenging to move them, but we know that there may be some potential to reconfigure them or potentially cross the railroad to really provide some additional connectivity. And so we're thinking about what that looks like. And then thinking about this concept as trails as mobility. So we know trails are important to folks, particularly from a recreation standpoint, but how do we also use our trail system to create some mobility options through the site and to the rest of Longmont? So we're evaluating a number of different alternatives. We're thinking about what those crossings look like. Can we have a better at-grade crossing? Do we want to consider a grade separated crossing over the rail? Obviously that has some pretty significant cost implications, but does get us out of having to deal with creating challenges with working with the railroad. So we're working through a lot of those options, and in the next phase, we'll be thinking about what some of these specific improvements might look like. Next slide, please. So I'm going to spend just a second going through some of the alternatives here, and really do want to know one thing that's pretty important that hasn't been updated here is we did take this to City Council and got some pretty specific direction from them that they feel that the STEAM area, so this area that we're looking at now, which again is on the west side of the study area, is really the area that should be looked at for a future performing arts center. And so you will see in the sugar factory alternatives, that's a concept that was being explored. But I think in our next iteration, we'll be really focusing on the STEAM area. And so some of the things that we see here include, obviously, in the cultural district and infill housing on the, what I guess for all of us will be the left-hand side. I'm not facing a different direction than you this time. Really see opportunities for that new performing arts center along Main Street. And I think, and obviously Councilmember Martin can jump in here, but I think the thinking was really that we want to be able to take advantage of some of the investments and opportunities that are going to be coming with the transit station at First and Main. And this is a really good location for this type of venue. So also may include live music, other music and arts facilities, maybe space for a hotel and conference facility, other event spaces. Certainly, we think that multifamily housing, live-work housing could have some real viability in this area. Also exploring the concepts of a market and a food hall, maybe a plaza, a park gateway, really, as we enter Dickens Farm nature area. So at that extension of Emory and Boston, that intersection. And then in both alternatives, you'll see Emory really envisioned as a shared street. And so we're interested from the community and staff on what does that mean to us? You know, is that a space that we could potentially build and shut down for events that could really complement some of the other uses here? Is that a space where, you know, all modes are interspersed equally? What does that kind of shared street look like? As we look at the other alternative, a lot of similar components in terms of thinking about live work, multifamily housing that fronts the park. Thinking about, though, what would it be like if this was more focused on mixed use office and more jobs and a campus type setting. So again, knowing that we probably would accommodate a performing arts facility in this location, what are some of those other elements? So what type of office or campus setting could we see? Is there the ability to do some type of public or institutional facility that maybe takes advantage of that location near the park? And so those are some of the things that we've explored for that. If you go to the next slide, please. So as we shift east and look at the sugar factory, again, we've got two strategies here. I should have noted before that last slide, the way that we're looking at this is not that we're going to say, okay, we're adopting option A and that's going into the plan, but really we're interested in understanding from the community, from advisory boards, from council, what elements of each of these alternatives do people really gravitate to, and what could we really think about as we move towards those preferred alternatives? So in this case, we've got, again, two strategies. One is really thinking about that cultural campus. And so in this case, again, knowing that if there's performing arts, it would likely be located further west. What other types of arts and culture could we really think about on a cultural arts campus? So that could be indoor, outdoor music venues, cultural park, artist studios, again, event space, farmers market, neighborhood supporting retail. Food and beverage type uses has come up a lot with the community. So restaurants, breweries, distilleries. And then another thing that you'll see common to both scenarios is housing. So we would anticipate, you know, multifamily housing, but also missing middle housing. And so we think there's an opportunity here for, you know, townhomes, the plexes, duplex, triplex, fourplex, maybe cottage homes, different types of housing that may be a little bit lower density than apartments and condos, but could really be an asset and provide some much needed attainable housing. As you shift to the other option, which again, as we face the screen, is going to be on our right-hand side, this is really focused on an agricultural hub and sort of what we're calling a maker-doer campus. And so this really takes the concepts that were identified in that Urban Land Institute report and really builds on that and builds on a lot of what we've heard from the community. So thinking about the importance of food, agriculture, and wellness in these options, maybe there's a place for food incubator space, thinking about agricultural tech type uses, industrial uses that would really support agriculture. There may be an opportunity for high yield greenhouses. We've had folks that have suggested maybe some sort of environmental center, like at the Greenway, that could really be for learning. Again, still seeing some opportunities for neighborhood retail, missing middle housing, multifamily housing, and again, those food and beverage type uses here. I'll stop because I think board member Mary Lynn has a question.
Yeah, I keep seeing the use of the terms agri-hub, and I think food hub has also been used. Maybe we can ask John or Ben if they're still in the meeting. I believe that those are technical terms for a commercial food processing space, and it doesn't seem like it really fits in a plan like this to have a commercial space like that, which, you know, and I think maybe there's a different term that you're grasping for in here. I don't know. And also, I mean, if there have been a lot of farmers consulted in this, I don't think that I'm not sure that they would be voting to have a commercial space that isn't open to the public, that has big trucks coming and going, that ideally is going to be cheap warehouse space that you can put in the, you know, the washing facilities and so forth, really kind of fits in this sort of fun community vision that you're doing. So anyway.
So, not sure if that's a question for me or if there's someone else on the call that you're expecting
Well,
to
I
respond.
just don't think that the use of the term agri-hub is what you think it means, and I think that farmers in the area really need to be consulted to see what it is that they need in terms of an actual agri-hub or food hub.
Yeah, so
Where it would actually make most sense for it to be located for them.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. We want to consult with folks, and we did actually do outreach when we did the Urban Land Institute Technical Advisory Panel. We had a group, we had several focus groups, and on some of those focus groups, we did have some folks from that are involved in agriculture, that are, we had the farmers market participating. And so this idea really did come from the community. And, you know, we had some folks on that panel that were working for CSU that really identified this as a good opportunity. So I think you raised some good points. We don't know exactly what facilities that those are. And certainly the city is not the one to necessarily construct those. But I think the idea here was that agriculture is a big part of Longmont's history. And certainly in and around the sugar factory, it was a big piece of this area. And so is there a way to incorporate some of those uses? And that might be through some sort of commercial kitchen, through some sort of incubator space, through some sort of value add.
But those are, you know, an incubator space, an incubator kitchen, ghost kitchen, that's a different facility than a food hub. And I think if the city is really serious about that, it should really do a focused research project to talk to the farmers. I don't know, are Ben and John still on the call? Maybe one of you guys has some input on that, because it just, it seems, you know, it seems like almost like you're talking about an agriculture museum or something, you know, or agriculture demonstration spaces, and that's different than the commercial facility of an agri-hub.
So it looks like John and Ben are both still on the call. So I'm not entirely certain what my role as a facilitator can be, since this is not my meeting, but I saw Ben's hand up first. So if the chair is okay with hearing.
I'm definitely okay with it. Yeah. And I'm trying to unmute one or both,
There
but
we go.
John is both are on unmuted. So Ben, please.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think, you know, we joined the call today because we were just down at the East Denver Food Hub this morning, and we are working with a number of local farms in Boulder County, and, you know, it looks like, you know, we need to move food all the way down to Denver to do aggregation and sorting into household boxes. And after seeing that on the way back, we were just talking about how great it would be to have a food hub in Longmont for Boulder County farms, and how this could be a real big help, not only for the farmers, but also for local food makers that want to, you know, use local produce and agricultural products in they're making what the stuff that they make. And so I think, you know, we're really excited about the fact that you're talking about an agri-hub. I think to Mary's point about, you know, is this the right location? Obviously, we need, you know, you need to be able to you need to have docking for big trucks and space for them to maneuver. And it's not necessarily, I guess it's nice to see activity. If it's a residential area, you want to know that stuff is happening there too. That's cool, but yeah, it might be also inconvenient to have trucks lining up and waiting to dock and that kind of activity. So it doesn't necessarily make sense from a logistical standpoint to have it mixed in with all kinds of other stuff. But certainly, we would expect sometime in the next year or two to be looking for space to do something like that. So anyway, I don't know if John wants to add to what I just said.
Sure. I agree. A food hub in Longmont sounds awesome. I don't know if it's what we saw today were farmers from the areas coming to one central location. I don't know if that's what you guys are kind of talking about, or if you're more looking at like having a grow space just for like a city activity and kind of a community event or kind of a place to grow. But you're not talking about like having like partnering with local farmers and having a place where you could aggregate local farm products into one central location in Longmont.
A USDA certified facility, basically, John.
So I will mention, this is a sub area planning effort, and it's really intended to sort of guide land use, development, and redevelopment opportunities, right? So we're not at the point where we're looking at a site plan for a facility and looking at where a loading dock's going to be and what does the lighting look like. That's much further down the road. But I think having information on what types of facilities does the city need, the area that we're talking about around the sugar factory is, over 120 acres. So it's considerable area. And then you've got Weaver Business Park to the north, which has some different opportunities. And so I think for us, we're really trying to look at what are those opportunities. Ben and John just gave me some good information. I'll take a look at the East Denver Food Hub. I don't know if specifically that type of facility would fit here. The other piece that's important to remember is, especially in the sugar factory area, this is all privately owned land, right? And so me as a planner doesn't get to dictate exactly what happens, right? We put land use down, and then property gets annexed to the city with zoning, and that permits a variety of uses. And I think we've talked about that a little bit on this board, kind of how that process works. But what I think we want to make sure is if those are the types of uses that fit here, great. We need to make sure that we have zoning that would permit that type of use. And if there's additional considerations from compatibility standpoint, from a placemaking standpoint, in terms of how close they can be to residential or not, what types of additional facilities and screening might need to happen, those types of things. Those are things we should think about from an implementation standpoint. So what I think I'm taking away is it might be good for me to connect with John and Ben after this call, and I really appreciate that. B, to Mary's point, maybe making sure that the terminology we're using works and that it's the terminology we're intending. And then, as we continue to prepare these plans, thinking about making sure we're articulating what the role of this plan is, and then kind of what those next steps are. And what's the city's potential role in helping facilitate future development, right? Because again, this is mostly private land, right? And so we certainly have a role in the entitlement process, but if there's things we want to see, are there incentives that we should be identifying for specific use? Are there public-private partnerships we could look at? And so, I don't know if there's other specific things, Mary, that you'd want to see. But certainly I think the terminology, to your point, matters, and making sure we're articulating what we are and are not thinking.
Well, I appreciate that the board, I've seen the board over and over again, and staff at the city council's direction, honoring Longmont's history and its present as an agricultural center. It's a different agricultural center now. There's more CSAs and more market gardeners and truck farmers, and regenerative agriculture projects showing up all the time, and we're actually meeting them. In fact, I think John and Ben are a good source to go to get a list of the local farmers. And yeah, I think that everyone, you just have to go to the farmer's market. Somebody posted pictures of it on Reddit from last weekend. People were huddled in their coats, cold, but packing the farmer's market. There's a lot of interest in integrating and expanding our access to local food, and there's got to be a way to do it. And I just think that the agri-hub term, maybe that needs to be separated out, and maybe there needs to be like the incubator project, the demonstration gardens, and the museum project, and then the commercial aspects more articulated. And I really encourage you and thank you for mentioning that you would like to sort of talk to farmers and folks working with the farmers more fully, Erin. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Kay, I think you might have a question as well.
Sorry, I'd support Mary's comment in the fact that I don't know much about agri-hubs, food hubs, or the what the terminology would be, or what this would entail down there. I think a lot of it I picture as, the farmer's market and access to like shops where people can go down and get the food. But if it sounds like more of an industrial processing facility, I'd look and say, is that the best use? But I don't know. I think I don't know enough about this stuff. So I appreciate Mary asking for more information. I will look forward to what else. I guess what you come, what it means more.
Yeah, and just to, if I didn't say this already, to reiterate, I mean, the final plan that we send to council will not be, a flat colored drawing with no labels and no additional words, right? We'll be able to explain what it is that we're talking about. We'll have some more details. What we hope to do is take these alternatives, get input from folks like you. We're going to be doing some outreach on Engage Longmont, asking the community some questions. We hope to take all of this and develop a preferred alternative. And from that, we'll be able to do some massing, so you can kind of see a little bit more like, what would this look like? How could these uses interact? Thinking about some renderings, what ultimately might this look like from the street view if you're a person that's there. Also really important to think about implementation, what kind of zoning changes might we need to make? What kind of financing tools might we want to explore? So there's going to need to be a lot of kind of the action steps, right? Action plan associated with this. And so that's really what's going to come next. So this is super helpful for me to think about what would make it easier for folks to understand. And I think we can go to the next slide, Heather, my last slide, which I think is really what I just said. So we're going to engage the community and we'll have, a slideshow that really talks about where we've been, what we're doing. We've got some concept images that kind of show people a little bit, which might help a little bit to kind of answer some of these questions of what does this mean? How does this look in other places? We'll be taking all of that to develop this preferred plan, thinking about phasing, infrastructure needs. Again, what's the city's role? How can we partner? And then we'll be drafting the actual plan that will go back to City Council. And we're hoping that goes to City Council. We need to take it to Planning Commission, as well as the Transportation Advisory Board because of those land use and transportation components. We're hoping to do that in June. And then we will take this to City Council for their acceptance, hopefully in that July timeframe is what we're planning. So with that, I'd be happy to take any additional comments or questions that you all may have, and really just appreciate your time tonight.
I'll give a comment that I can't remember what it was called, but you guys put together that kind of general, just like the conference call, everybody went on the boards and posted comments, and that was just fantastic. And I'm really impressed with how much you guys have pulled together on this so quickly after that. It looks really great, Erin. It's really exciting to see it start kind of coming in and turning into something. So I appreciate your colorful maps.
Thank you. Thanks for that feedback.
I
a little
appreciate
unnerving to do a Zoom meeting, but it went well. So thanks for participating.
Yeah, that was a great meeting that you guys had, and a lot of fun, and it's just neat to see it coming together really quickly. And I will say really quickly, I did not expect that you would have an update this quickly, and because of all that information, but it looks like you guys really have some great targets going right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll echo that. It looks great. Thank you for giving us this update. Adam.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. Really appreciate the update. And Aaron, when you were showing one of the maps, I think it was before the sugar beet area, the steam area, I think that the area below First Avenue resides in a floodplain. And you mentioned having natural space as well as like an outdoor learning center. And I wondered, has there been any consideration of putting those areas below First Avenue, since it's in a floodplain and it's not like you're building some of the larger buildings there that could potentially be at risk?
So that's a great question. That property is, much of that property is currently within the floodplain. The city has been working on projects to remove a fairly large amount of that area from the floodplain. And so within the next couple of years, we would anticipate that much of that property comes out of the floodplain and creates some different types of development opportunities. And so, yes, I think there is an opportunity to look for some pretty significant public space, really to build on what's gone downtown, and then really kind of as that transition to Dickens Farm Nature Area, which is an amazing amenity to the south of the steam area. But I think the thinking is that much of that area will become developable because it will no longer be within the floodplain. So that's just kind of a timing thing. And that's probably, and Hannah, you can certainly jump in here, but I think that's probably two or so years out.
Yeah, I would say so. They have to go through some processes with FEMA. So not only the actual construction itself, but the process with FEMA to amend the floodplain maps. So I'd say a couple of years out as well. And there's also some wetlands on the property, on the western side of the property, not into steam, but on the west side of the sugar factory property that we're also looking at from kind of an environmental standpoint of, does that make sense to make that more public open space or utilize it for open space, stormwater management, something of this sort. So we're certainly looking at, whenever we look at something like low impact development, we kind of figure out where are the natural amenities, where's the water going anyways, and help. And again, this is private development, so we can't totally control it, but trying to help them early on understand where those natural features are and how they can best take advantage of them.
Thank you. Great question. Other thoughts, comments, questions?
So stay tuned later this week, early next week, we'll have some information up on our Engage Longmont site. So if you want to provide some specific feedback, I can certainly send that to Lisa and she could get that out. But we will have some additional content up there and would love to have your thoughts as well.
Great, thank you. Mary, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to say that I really appreciate your comment at the beginning of the presentation that there will be a focus on ownership opportunities. Longmont has, as far as I'm concerned, far too many big box apartments. Folks who live in apartments like that who don't have access to land, who aren't owners. I can't imagine that they are the engaged citizens that we really want and need in Longmont. I know that there is more transients when there are apartments, and the ownership, I think, really helps to build the social fabric in a positive way. So thank you for your focus on that.
Charles.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. That was a really great presentation, and definitely appreciate all the effort and thought that went into the due diligence to get it to this point, and what you'll do going forward. Just one thing that's mentioned, and one of the attributes that, long list of attributes on the slides was sustainable building. I think was one thing on there, and I hope that that's a very aggressive definition of sustainable building. What I've noticed from construction around Longmont, and I'm sure pretty much around the entire United States, for example, even this year, is a lot of construction that's actually not that different from what we saw 20, 30 years ago. The technology is basically 200-year-old technology. And these buildings will have a lifetime in the 100 to 200 year range. And it's not like a car where you buy a gasoline consuming car and 20 years from now, it gets recycled. These things will take, a century or two before they end up. So they're going to be using energy for heating and cooling, et cetera, inefficiently for the next, 100 to 200 years. And we have technology now that's already much better than what's being used. So I hope there's incentives or something that could be done that really pushes that term for sustainable building forward. This is 100 years from now, people are going to be asking about, why do we have this huge housing stock that is, from using stick-built construction, and there's no geothermal or whatever. So anyway, just a comment there. I hope that that we're really going to be aggressive pushing that aspect.
A great comment, thank you, and definitely something we're thinking about. I think you bring up a really good point. I liked that you said kind of incentives and thinking about what the city's role might be in incenting that. As you know, we obviously have codes that require minimum standards. And so thinking about how can we push beyond that, and maybe this plan is a really good first place to start.
Thank you.
Marcia.
Thank you. I would just like to add that there are a number of initiatives going on to determine what kind of code changes we need. So there is a beneficial electrification committee that's going to get us ready to produce housing stock that doesn't have natural gas service to the houses that are ready for solar, ready for heat pumps, all of that, as well as green passive building envelope codes that will need to be looked into, and tighter land use codes that favor urban density and all that stuff. So since it's 2 years until we expect to be able to actually break ground on buildings, I think that we should have our new building styles and techniques pretty much nailed down. The city is already looking at manufactured housing, not the old trailer park kind of stuff, but the very much higher grade and more adaptable technologies that are being used now. So I hope we're going to be in good shape. If FEMA gets out ahead of its skis and lets us break ground in 6 months, we probably still won't be able to be ready before then anyway.
Well, when would the permit be pulled though? Because wouldn't that determine more the type of material used? Is it really quick? Like, would it be like 2 years from now and then break ground pretty quickly thereafter?
I would rather have Aaron answer that, but I don't think there is a significantly different timeline. Nobody's going to be pulling a permit in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, much to the chagrin of folks in the development community, there's a lot of entitlements that would need to happen. Some of the properties in the study area aren't even annexed to the city yet, and so they would need to go through annexation and platting, site planning. So there's some land use processes that would need to occur. I think we've talked about those with this group. And then post that, then there's the building review. And so to your point, Chair, the current building code in the time that building permit is pulled is what's going to govern, what codes it's built under, right? So we're a ways out from seeing vertical development in most of this area.
I'll throw in there, lately my career is very relevant to this discussion. I do know that architects are bracing for international, like IBC building code updates in the next 2 years that are going to further amplify that whole energy efficiency section right now that's there. And so there will be a lot more updates, Charles, to go along with the sustainable stuff. I can't say to the degree it won't be 50 years down the road, but it will at least be even more current than the latest update, which was 2018. To get the building code, they need to submit full design plans with it, with all the comm checks, all the electrical, plumbing, everything has got to be in place, as well as like things like the permitting for the waste piping and all that stuff too. So it's going to take quite a while to get together the full community plans. They're going to have to go with those permits. So I would anticipate at least one major building code update. Who knows if they're still permitting it 2 years down the road. You know, I say Longmont may have to hire some extra building some more building inspectors to go through developments of this size, all going in, maybe if they all go in at once. But yeah, so I'd say it'll be a while before they go through, and they're not going to be able to push them through on these earlier codes right now that we have. Hopefully we'll get some really good stuff out of it.
Thanks for the reassurance, y'all.
Yeah, I'm just here to give you, there's my positive reassurance for you for the day. I know that's not how it usually goes, but.
Appreciate it. So on this, is there an action for the group here, for the board? Do we need, this is just an informational update, is that correct?
I think that's correct. This is informational. Certainly, I've taken some notes and can report back on the feedback I've gotten. You know, if there's something that you as a group want to make a motion on, you could, but that's not what we were expecting today. So just information, and really appreciate your thoughtful feedback.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate y'all being here with this presentation. Always appreciate an update on what's going on from you. And so thank you. With that, I think the next item on the agenda is determining where we're going to meet going forward. And I would like to ask if anybody has objections to continuing the online format.
My only objection to continuing this format is that I think it's really unfair to the public that we cannot see them. And I know that the reason why the public is not shown in video is because there have been incidents around the world of folks showing up for public meetings on camera in, shall we say, questionable attire. And showing signs and such that, you know, might have unsavory things on them. However, I've been watching a great many public meetings, including many in the UK that are national public meetings, and this seems to be something that's very rare and is accepted and controlled for in other areas. And I would like to ask that we can try to allow that in our community as well. That we consider staying with the virtual format, but allowing the public to be seen, not just heard.
So part of the reason that the video has also not been allowed is because of equal access for everyone. Not everybody has the capability to join with a video. And so to keep that playing field fair for everybody, they originally started out with doing audio only. We can check with the city clerk's office and see if that guidance has changed, but that was a big portion of why we did that as well.
I understand that. Thank you.
Other thoughts on the topic? Thanks for chiming in there, Heather. Is anybody really excited to go back to in person? A lot of apathy from the board. Wait, I think Kay's talking on mute. Everybody drink.
I'm sorry. I have a separate mute on my speaker here. So so it doesn't look like I'm muted when I muted myself. I was say, I think that I wouldn't mind going back to in person. I think it'd be great to see you guys in person and be able to flip around a laptop and say, oh, here's what I'm seeing online. Because I'll say the fun of being remote is I get to Google things all the way through the meeting. And, you know, it's just how I function with 3 screens running. I have my agenda, I have your faces, I have whatever other fun question and topic, and searching East Denver food hub at the same time. But I think the one thing that was holding us back from meeting in person was I want to say sometimes scheduling conflicts that I would have with little people, and Charles having another meeting, I think before this, right, Charles?
Yeah, my schedule's about to change, and so you know, we're at the end of the semester, so who knows what will be later. But yeah, that was definitely a problem, and I appreciate the flexibility to schedule around that. Going forward, just a quick, you know, I am in Boulder, so if we meet in person, meeting after business hours definitely helps me.
I'll chime in and say, I appreciate the sustainability piece of us meeting virtually. You know, we don't have to drive anywhere. We can be wherever in our office or bedroom, as it were, and meet. And I appreciate that. Obviously, there's a time piece that's saved, but not driving feels good. Adam.
Sure, I'll second a point that Charles made. I do agree that if we meet in person, it'd be much more helpful, for me at least, to have it after business hours. That said, I understand it's probably harder for staff, but I'm wondering if it might be more convenient for the public waiting to be heard as well, given that folks probably would be more likely to attend this meeting if we're after business hours. So I'm just curious if that would increase the attendance of the public waiting to be heard.
The after hours is generally what conflicts with me. I struggle with after hours, but I would say I may not be on the board forever unless everyone begs and pleads me to stay. Just because I have been getting really, I'm underwater with a lot of stuff right now. And I think my term expires in June, so that may open opportunities for you guys to have, be able to meet after hours. You're welcome to always call me every now and then and ask me to come hang out. But I may let this board move on without me after my term expires this summer, and maybe see if I pick up on another board or just break for a while. So I want to say maybe we keep it virtual for a while until June, and then maybe I won't be on the phone one day and you guys can make a new decision.
While we're on that topic, we do have 3 vacancies that are coming up at the end of June. Right now, the application process for new board members is open. So if anybody is interested in reapplying for those 3 positions, or if you know anybody else who's interested in applying, the deadline for that has been extended to Monday. So they need to get the applications in by Monday at 5. So.
Heather, can I also just jump in real quick with that? Heather and I will be coordinating with you probably between the April and the May meetings for the folks that volunteered to review the applications. Yeah.
I heard about 70% of what you just said.
Sorry, thanks. Okay. I just wanted to remind folks that between the April and May meetings, after we get those applicants in, Heather and I will be coordinating with the folks that volunteered to be our applicant reviewers. Gotcha. So be on the lookout for correspondence from us.
Thank you. So I'm open to kicking this can down the road one more time. Just having another virtual meeting in May. And at the, so is June your last meeting then, Kay?
I'd have to Google
Yeah, the terms go
actual-
through June, so June would be their last meeting. So it would be for Kay and Adam and Mary.
Okay. How do folks feel about keeping as is through June? And then we can revisit the topic.
I make a motion that we keep the meetings virtual through June.
I would recommend that we have a recommendation for what we want after that, so people who are considering being on the board can know what they're signing up for, and that we aren't in a state of paralysis about what we recommend.
It's a really thoughtful comment. And
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, how's this? I will agree that June will be my last meeting unless anyone calls to beg and plead me to stay, or unless the rules can be modified that I can miss more meetings each year. I will go ahead and say I will resign after the June meeting. Feel free to call me for coffee, anyone. But that way you guys can feel free to move to after hours, at least if that works for everyone else except me. I think it's great to let you all take it from here.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I do think I like the idea of having it more accessible to the public, and an after hours, after something, 5:30 or so, feels more accessible to me from my perspective. And I'm open to thoughts that might disagree with that. Would others, are there any strong objections to an after hours? Are you nodding, Charles, in agreement, or?
I apologize, but I have to run. Whatever you guys decide is fine.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, that all sounds good to me.
Okay, so through June, let's
So we need a second for that motion.
Yeah, we need a second for that motion.
I'll second Mary's motion.
Okay, all in favor? Okay,
I
great.
can still vote for you guys.
And then going forward after June, we'll plan to move to an evening meeting, and we can let potential board members know that.
So at the June meeting, are you going to set time for that? Okay.
We will.
Okay.
Will you please add that to the agenda for the June meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the agenda, unless I'm missing something. I think we're there. Are there any items from council, Marcia?
No.
Great.
I don't think so. I've been talking quite enough.
Right. Okay, a reminder that there are some informational items attached to your packet. It's just an FYI, please be sure and read them. And with that, we're at the end of the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thanks everybody. It's a great meeting.
Thanks,
Thank
Evan.
you.
Everyone,
Take care.
take care.
Bye.
Hey, everyone.